Hello, everyone. Welcome back. This is a lecture for Chapter 1, Psychology as a Way of Thinking. In this chapter, we're going to talk about research producers and consumers and how they're different and how they're similar and how that applies to you. And then the second part, we're going to talk about how scientists approach their work. So first, the producer role is important for you in this class. You are going to become a producer. The research proposal is going to require that you don't fully become a producer, but you're going to think like a producer. So you'll essentially come up with a plan to do a full research study. You don't have to follow through with it. It's great if you do, but you're going to have to think through that whole process. Also, if you're thinking about grad school, especially in psychology or related fields, you're going to end up needing to do research, at least for your thesis or a dissertation. And often you're going to be working in a research lab. So these things are going to be important for you going forward. Even if you decide not to do grad school or work in psychology, understanding what it takes to be a producer is going to be very important for you to be a better consumer of research. So far, you've been a consumer in a couple ways. Any other psychology courses you've taken, you have been a consumer. And in this role, you can think about any time that a professor was sharing something about psychology, almost always they were using at least one research study, maybe many. There's also, you probably have encountered in news that cover research that just came out. These are often things like, look what this treatment does. It'll make you look younger, or riding your bike every day saves you from getting a heart attack, stuff like that. However, if you don't understand how to read research, you have to just take their word for it. They're translating this thing for you, and they could be right, they could be wrong, they could be somewhere in between. And if you don't have that ability to really consume research, you're going to be relying on that. Also, if you do decide to go into psychology, if you decide to do therapy, you're going to be relying on what are called evidence-based treatments. Treatments that have been shown with data to work, not just based on someone's experience or their intuition. So in this class, we're going to understand how scientists work. Scientists are empiricists. We'll talk about what that word means exactly in a sec. Scientists test theories, and they use the theory data cycle to do that. Scientists tackle applied and basic problems. So we're going to talk more about that. There's so many research opportunities for scientists in psychology. Scientists also make it public. They publish their work. They make it generalizable knowledge so other people can learn from it and try to improve on it. Also, scientists aren't trapped to just using the formal publication process. They can use blogs. They can use social media. Personally, I use Twitter to communicate my work and to communicate about other work that I think is important. I find it as really fulfilling to be able to share it and get feedback on it quickly. Not everyone likes that, but in science, we don't limit ourselves to only a few ways of communicating. So when I talk about empiricists or empiricism or the empirical method or empirical research, the reason why I bring it up, one is there's a variety of ways of knowing about the world. And those ways aren't bad. The book may make it sound that way, but intuition and experience can be good and real. Authority can be helpful. However, in science, we don't rely on those things. Instead, we're going to rely on data, and we're going to rely on evidence from the senses, from instruments that can help our senses understand things. These are going to be how we're going to work in science. But I want you to know that does not mean that intuition and experience aren't real. There are things that you have experienced, and those things are real. That experience was real. Doesn't mean you understand the cause and effect of all of it, but that experience shouldn't be downplayed just because it isn't empiricism. Also, empiricism can't answer every question. There's important questions that just can't be answered by research. For example, what's the purpose of life? Is there a purpose of life? Those things can't be answered by science. Science can answer what people generally believe about those things, but it can't answer that question for us. So in science, there are certain questions that we can tackle. There's others that we can't or are very difficult to tackle with empiricism. So empiricism is how we're going to work in this class as scientists, but it is not the only way to understand the world. So in the book, it talked about this study where it was talking about the cupboard theory versus the comfort contact theory, or contact comfort contact. I can't remember. One of the two. I can even look it up. So it's contact comfort theory. So in that, the idea was to test, will a baby monkey prefer a wire mother that provides food and nourishment, or a comforting mother that looks like a monkey and is soft to the touch, that does not provide food? And instead of debating about it and getting all up in arms, they decided to run an experiment. And this experiment showed that baby monkeys preferred the cloth mothers, which hints, it gives us evidence in favor of baby monkeys wanting a comforting mother instead of preferring a very hard but nourishment providing mother. This research question can help lead to more research questions. For example, does this apply to human infant behavior? Do infants attach to their moms because their moms are soft and comforting, or because they provide food? In a lot of cases, there are ethical issues and other limitations that make it so we can't extend the exact experiment to a different population like humans. However, this information alone can help us understand maybe other ways that we can look at how humans behave. So, in this is a great example of the theory data cycle. It's where we start with this theory, which is a well-grounded idea that's based on data and is falsifiable. We'll talk about more of what makes a good theory in the next slide. But we start with the theory. It leads to research questions. For example, do baby monkeys prefer a very wire, hard mom that provides food, or a soft, comforting mom? This will result in them designing a research study. This is always in the context of the research questions and the theory, which will lead to hypotheses. Hypotheses are essentially ideas of what the results will look like. For example, we hypothesize that baby monkeys will prefer a cloth monkey instead of the wire one, or vice versa. And in that case, it is falsifiable. If the monkeys do not prefer the cloth monkey, then it's false. And that is okay. The fact that we made a hypothesis that can be, there can be evidence supporting or inconsistent with it, that is how science works. So the last step is getting data. We need to get the data that then feeds back into the cycle. Either the data support or it's inconsistent with the theory, and we realize either we need to adjust the theory, revise it, or we need to change the research design so that it can be more straightforward. Maybe our results are kind of ambiguous and it doesn't answer our research questions very well. That happens a lot. But this cycle is really important. It helps us stepwise increase in knowledge and understanding of an area. So what is a good scientific theory? Well, it's one that's supported by data. Often we think of theories as like really basic and not very solid. But it's good to know that theories drive a lot of our medicine. It's the reason why we landed on the moon, the reason why we may go back, the reason why we might go to Mars. These things are based on theories. So theories, even though they may have this bad reputation of just being like soft or not real, we use them, and we use them to do incredible things. Another thing about theories is that they're falsifiable. So if you think about the statement, there is a Loch Ness monster, what would it take to show that that statement wasn't true? It would take, essentially, you would have to show every inch of Loch Ness at the same time to show that there's no monster there. And even then, there could be other explanations. You could say, well, maybe the monster was on vacation. He went to a different lake. So that isn't really falsifiable. On the other end, though, if we switch it around, if we say there is no Loch Ness monster, how can we show that that statement isn't true? All we need is to find one Loch Ness monster and we can falsify it. So even the same topic, you can move the phrasing around to make it falsifiable. It takes practice, but you can get it. Another thing about a good scientific theory is that it's parsimonious. That means it's simple. It's not overly complex. It explains things, it's supported by data, but it's still not overly complex. Some of the most crazy physics theories can be explained pretty easily in terms that a layman, not a scientist or not a physicist, could understand. The last thing is research and theories don't prove anything. Ultimately, it is the weight of the evidence that leads us in one direction or another. So it's evidence. So if you can get prove and proof out of your vocabulary when it comes to science, that will really help you. So no study proves anything. And this was actually how the tobacco companies kept from getting sued for so long. They would use this idea that these studies showing a connection between smoking and cancer, it doesn't prove that there's a connection. However, over time, the weight of the evidence, there's just so much evidence supporting this theory that tobacco smoke causes lung cancer, that at some point it was just undeniable. And sometimes that's the way the science works. We can't necessarily design an ethical study where we have 20 people smoke and 20 people don't and just see what happens. Sometimes it just takes a while and the weight of the evidence builds. So when it comes to the types of questions you can ask, so be thinking about your research proposal here. You can ask questions that are related to basic research, translational research, or applied research. I really like these distinctions that the book makes here. So basic research is really foundational stuff. So the example here, what parts of the brain are active when experienced meditators are meditating? This is a really important question. What happens when this individual who meditates a lot meditates? But that doesn't answer what does that do for the average person, or does it help even experienced meditators? Does that help them? Does meditating help in some way? Translational research is a step in that direction. So let's say in a controlled experiment, so in a laboratory, can meditation lessons improve college students' GRE scores? So now we're past what is meditation doing to the brain, and we're saying, okay, it may do stuff to the brain, but what does that translate to with individuals? So in a very controlled study, does it help college students? And a step beyond that is this idea of, okay, we believe meditation is helping. Can we design a program that could help a bunch of elementary students? So we provide this intervention at a school, and we study, does this help them in their math lessons? Do they focus longer? So each of these areas, you could ask a question in those areas. So when you're thinking of your research proposal, be thinking about this. Am I more interested in the applied, translational, or basic? All right, so back to the news where I was saying, if you don't understand how to read the research, you're going to end up relying on someone else translating it for you. And this exaggerates it, but it gives you the idea of how this kind of happens. So first, your research, the conclusion is A is correlated with B, given C, assuming D, and under E conditions. But eventually, you get to A causes B, say scientists, and then it goes even further and it says A causes B all the time. And then what does this mean for politics, for Obama, for Trump, whatever? And at some point, someone might tell you, this is actually, I want to make sure I don't get cancer. I'm going to wear a funky hat. So what this class is going to help you do is understand this part so you don't have to rely on other people interpreting it for you. In order to do that, you got to go to the source. And the source in science is usually a scientific journal. This is where the scientists usually share their results with the scientific community. So this isn't, it's not made for the general public, but you aren't the general public anymore. In this class, you're going to learn how to understand research. You're not going to be an expert, but you will begin to understand how to read a journal article and get information out of it. A journal article is, so a journal is like a magazine essentially that has articles in it written by experts that did scientific research. Importantly, these rely on peer review. So peer review is this process wherein if I'm the researcher, I do research and I provide it to this journal. I want them to publish it for me. The editor will get it, and if he sees that, yeah, this really fits what the journal is trying to communicate, he or she, they will send it to some other experts in the field, peers, that will review the article, provide suggestions, ways that it can be improved, and they'll give the editor a recommendation either to reject the articles, so don't publish it, a revise and resubmit, which means we think it's good, but it needs to be improved before it should be accepted, or accept, which is maybe a few minor changes and then accept it into the journal. What this peer review process is trying to do is it's trying to be a gatekeeper. It's trying to keep the scientific literature more rigorous, which means it's more solid. So when it's working well, that's exactly what it does. It's not perfect. It's probably the best we got right now, but that is the purpose of it, is to help research, good research, get published, and poor research to become better research and to maybe eventually get published. So that's chapter 1. It's really broad. We didn't go into a ton of terms, but this is really foundational for the rest of the class. This is how we're going to be working. So throughout the rest of the class, every time we talk about a topic, be thinking how it applies to your research proposal. In the next lecture, I will talk about what the research proposal will look like in general and the assignments that are going to lead up to it. Keep those in mind so these things don't sneak up on you and you're totally ready for the assignments as they come. If you work really hard throughout the semester, the final project will end up being very easy. If you put it off, the final project is going to be extremely difficult and your grade is going to suffer. So start thinking about it now and you'll do great.